Let's begin our news bulletin in Indian-occupied Kashmir, where Indian troops have martyred 2 more youth in occupied Kashmir's Rajouri district. Occupation forces targeted the civilians during a cordon and search operation in Kari area of the district. Indian forces have been accused of conducting fake encounters during military operations. Yesterday, Indian forces killed 2 Kashmiri youth in a similar operation in Islamabad district, while Indian forces killed 61 Kashmiri civilians just in the month of June. Indian atrocities in the occupied territories have sharply increased despite the COVID-19 outbreak. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 332 days. Well, Islamabad says India is orchestrating terrorism in Pakistan to divert the world's attention from its state crimes, especially in occupied Kashmir. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India is constantly involved in subversive activities in the province of Balochistan. Qureshi said India is also trying to disrupt peace efforts in Afghanistan. The foreign minister said he has apprised the U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad of the Indian role of a spoiler in Afghanistan. He said on the 29th of June, attackers wanted to take hostages at the Pakistan Stock Exchange during the attack on the country's financial hub, Karachi. Meanwhile, Pakistan's special envoy for Afghanistan, Mohammad Sadiq, met with Qureshi. The foreign minister said Pakistan would continue playing a positive and constructive role for peace and stability in Afghanistan. COVID-19 is surging in the U.S. once again, with daily deaths climbing to almost 1,200, while the toll has risen to over 127,000. In Brazil, the death toll has surged to almost 60,000, with 1,280 more fatalities in the past 24 hours. Globally, 510,000 people have died so far, with over 10.4 million infections.
After registering a slight downward trend, the new coronavirus has made an aggressive comeback in the U.S. with over 46,000 testing positive overnight. While President Donald Trump pushes for mass reopening, 16 states have paused their plans to lift restrictions amid record surge in cases. Director Institute for Infectious Disease Dr. Anthony Fauci has warned the second wave could be worse than the first.
We are now having 40+ thousand new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around, and so I am very concerned.
Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro continues to ease social distancing restrictions despite alarming growth in the number of infections and deaths. The World Health Organization says the situation in Brazil is going to get even worse.
The IHME estimates that under the current conditions in South America, countries such as Chile and Colombia will be seeing their peak of cases between now and mid-July, whereas Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, and Peru will see it at some point in August.
The potential second wave of COVID-19 has forced a number of countries to reconsider lifting restrictions. Canada is extending the travel ban and its mandatory quarantine measures for foreign travelers and citizens returning home to July 31st. Australia too has locked down 300,000 inhabitants of more than 30 suburbs of Melbourne after a coronavirus spike.
Well, Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has reached nearly 4,400, with 91 more fatalities in the past 24 hours. The health ministry said over 4,133 tested positive overnight, bringing the total to over 213,000. It said nearly 50% of the cases have recovered so far, while over 2,700 remain critical. The ministry said about 108,000 cases are active in the country. It said the province of Punjab has reported the most overnight infections, with nearly 1,800 cases. Sindh province reported almost 1,400 infections, while the capital Islamabad registered 128 infections. The Dutch Parliament has passed a motion calling for the government to prepare sanctions against Israel if it annexes the occupied West Bank. The motion was backed by parties with a majority of 87 lawmakers in the 150-seat lower house. The resolution was submitted by the Socialist Party members. It said annexation would be a gross violation of international law. The ruling VVD party and the Party for Freedom were among those that opposed the motion. On Friday, Belgium's Chamber of Representatives voted in favor of a similar motion. Earlier, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he would start annexation of Palestinian territories today. The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has urged the UNSC to indefinitely extend an arms embargo on Iran before it expires in October. Speaking virtually at a Security Council meeting, Pompeo said Iran is not a responsible democracy and must be held accountable. He said Tehran is already violating the arms embargo even before its expiration date. At the meeting, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif dismissed the claims of aggression, saying it is the U.S. that has directly undermined global peace. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said Beijing opposes efforts to put pressure on Iran. He said having quit the JCPOA, the U.S. has no right to trigger a snapback at the UN. Meanwhile, Russia's UN ambassador Vasily Nebenzia described the U.S. strategy as a maximum suffocation policy. Nebenzia said Washington's task is to achieve regime change or create a situation where Tehran will not be able to breathe. U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has met with foreign ministers of 5 Central Asian countries to discuss the role of the C5 in the Afghan peace process. In a series of tweets, Khalilzad said the leaders held a meeting in Tashkent and discussed how Central Asia will benefit from peace in the region. Khalilzad said they also discussed increased regional connectivity, trade, and development after peace in Afghanistan. He said the U.S. appreciates the cooperation and the assistance of the C5+1. The envoy said the regional countries will need to work together for a political settlement when intra-Afghan talks begin. Khalilzad said they also discussed investments in each country and cross-border opportunities. The American envoy is scheduled to visit Afghanistan and Pakistan on his ongoing trip. Well, the UN has blamed Afghan forces for firing mortars that struck a market in Helmand province on Monday, killing 23 people. In a tweet, the UN assistance mission in Afghanistan said credible sources assert Afghan forces missed the intended target while responding to Taliban fire. Previously, Kabul blamed the Taliban for the violence, with President Ashraf Ghani condemning the incident as a terrorist attack. The UN mission called on the Afghan government to set up an independent investigation into the attack. It urged both the Taliban and government forces to stop fighting in civilian areas. The Taliban have denied responsibility for the explosions and have accused the Afghan army of firing the mortars. Three Myanmarese military officers have been found guilty by a court-martial investigating atrocities against the Rohingya. The Commander-in-Chief's office announced the court-martial had sentenced the officers. It did not, though, provide any details on the perpetrators, their crimes, or sentences. Rights groups accuse security forces of committing atrocities in various villages of Rakhine State. The rare action comes as Myanmar faces charges of genocide at the UN's top court over a crackdown against the Rohingya in 2017. Some 750,000 Muslim Rohingya migrated to Bangladesh to flee widespread murder, rape, and arson. Hundreds of doctors and nurses have staged protests across France to press Paris for pay hikes and budget increases for the healthcare system. For their efforts during the outbreak, health workers said they should be awarded higher salaries and better equipment. In recognition of their contribution, the government paid health workers a €1,500 bonus. The French Health Minister Olivier Véran has also proposed the allotment of €6 billion to increase salaries for health workers. Protesters said they are already one of the lowest paid among the OECD members due to years of budget cuts. Russians across the country are voting today to decide on major amendments to the Constitution. President Vladimir Putin has declared a public holiday to encourage voting. The proposed amendments comprise of 206 reforms. The most important of these, they seek to strengthen and extend President Putin's rule potentially till 2036. However, Putin insists the changes are to guarantee stability, safety, well-being, and a decent life only through development. The Russian constitution currently permits a limit of 2 consecutive presidential terms, 6 years each. One protester has been killed and several others have been injured during largely peaceful demonstrations in Sudan. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets nationwide to demand greater civilian rule in the transition towards democracy. Police fired tear gas to disperse protesters marching on a road leading to the airport in the capital, Khartoum. Waving Sudanese flags, demonstrators gathered in Khartoum and its twin cities, Khartoum North and Omdurman. Similar protests also took place in Kassala in eastern Sudan and the restive region of Darfur. They chanted for freedom, peace, and justice, the slogan of the movement opposing al-Bashir. The million-man march was called for by the Sudanese Professionals Association and resistance committees. In Libya, 5 more corpses have been discovered in a mass grave in the western city of Tarhuna. The government's search team says the bodies were unearthed during excavation work. They said the total number of corpses removed from the area has now reached 24. So far, 11 mass graves have been discovered in and around the city. The GNA says Tarhuna once served as the main assembly point for Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned for that. Let's begin this half in Iran, where 19 people have been killed and 6 injured in an explosion at a hospital in the capital, Tehran. State media quoted senior officials as saying the blast was caused by a gas leak. Rescue officials said victims include 15 women and 4 men. They said people in the nearby Tajrish Bazaar rushed to the scene, which impeded rescue efforts. Officials said the healthcare facility had 25 employees inside at the time of the blast. Last week, a similar explosion occurred close to a military site near Tehran, but no deaths or injuries were reported in that incident. Well, in the U.S., racial equality activists and some lawmakers have rejected New York City's planned cuts to the $6 billion police budget, saying it falls short of demand. The City Council said $484 million will be slashed, while $354 million will be transferred to other city agencies in the 2021 fiscal budget. Some lawmakers refuse to budge on major downsizing of officers. Protesters, though, continue their demonstrations outside City Hall. A minority of left-wing legislators vowed to oppose the budget, while protesters said the government must push for parity throughout the city. Elsewhere, former Atlanta police officer charged in the Rayshard Brooks murder case has been granted a $500,000 bail. Over in Mississippi, Governor Tate Reeves signed a bill to replace the current state flag that includes a Confederate emblem.
There are people on either side of the flag debate who may never understand the other. We as a family must show empathy. We must understand that all who want change are not attempting to erase history, and all who want the status quo are not mean-spirited or hateful.
Meanwhile, the Austin Police Department has put 5 officers on administrative leave amid a probe into the use of force during May's George Floyd protests. Now, the Israeli startup Redefine Meat plans to launch 3D printers to produce plant-based steaks mimicking real beef next year. This is their bid to win a slice of the fast-growing alternative meat market. More on that now in this report.
Plant-based meat products are becoming increasingly popular with consumers worried about animal welfare and the environment. Based in Rehavat, Redefined Meat will first market test its alt steak at high-end restaurants later this year. They want to roll out industrial-scale 3D printers to meat distributors in 2021.
My name is Ishkhar Ben Shitrit. I am the CEO and co-founder of Redefined Meat. We're working on really good, really tasty meat that doesn't come from animals. Instead of using cows, we're using technology, in our case, 3D printing.
The company says the 3D printer mimics the structure of the muscle of the animal. It can currently print 3 to 6 kilograms of meat an hour, but the machines will be able to print 20 kg an hour next year and eventually hundreds at a cheaper cost than real meat.
We analyze the different components that make those beautiful cuts and try to figure out which are the key components that we need to mimic in order to achieve those beautiful cuts of meat. We identified 3 main components: the muscle, the blood, and the fat. These are the components that we need to mimic in order to reach the perfect, beautiful steak.
At a steakhouse in the capital, diners welcome the idea of replacing meat with plant-based solutions as soon as the taste will be as good as regular meat.
Using the 3D printer for making food helps to protect the environment, protect the animals, protect by killing innocent animals. That's good. I'm looking forward to try this. I hope it's going to be good, at least as original.
Spanish competitor Nova Meat first unveiled its 3D printed plant-based steak back in 2018. Now the company believes it has perfected the texture and appearance. Next is the taste and nutritional properties of beef steak.
Now, scientists in Vienna are seeking to sequence the genome of an ancient flowering plant. It is believed to have been buried by an Ice Age squirrel near the banks of the Kolyma River. More on that now in this report.
The Russian scientists have revived the Silene stenophila, a plant with white flowers native to Siberia, from 32,000-year-old seeds. They were found covered in ice 124 feet below the permafrost and regenerated in glass vials. But now, Austrian scientists are trying to map the genomes of the age-old plants.
Our Russian colleagues were, let's say, successful in regenerating the plant, so even to calling it back to life. And they were able to classify it to some extent. What we are hoping to do is now to go and really sequence it to the totality so that we have the entire genome in hands, which allows us then to design markers for very interesting areas of the genome.
Silene stenophila is the oldest plant ever to be regenerated. Scientists want to determine how the seeds were able to survive for so long.
The plant has managed to survive this time gap due to some very fortunate conditions, which are ones that it was probably dry when it was stored, and that it was deep enough down in earth, because there must have happened something, which we don't know what it was, that buried it very deeply. So now that permafrost soils in Russia are defrosting, we are finding testimonies of these ancient times which we did not even expect to find.
The researchers want to see if there are changes in plant genes that can adapt to very dry, hot, or cold conditions, which could be useful in helping to deal with climate change.
Now, most stocks in the Asia-Pacific region have edged higher as a private survey showed China's factory activity for June was better than expected. Mainland Chinese stocks are trading higher, with the Shanghai Composite and Shenzhen Component up by almost 1%. Shares in South Korea also traded higher, with the Kospi up by nearly 1%, but it later tanked over 0.5% to lose the gains made in earlier trading. Over in Australia, the S&P ASX 200 traded over 0.5% higher. Stocks in Japan lagged regionally, with the Nikkei 225 and Topix Index over 0.5%. But overall, the MSCI Asia ex-Japan Index rose by almost 0.5%. Markets in Hong Kong are closed for trading on Wednesday for a holiday. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. Well, for the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.news. Thanks very much for watching.